So let me ask you one that's actually purely on policy, because I mentioned to my locals community this morning that I was having you on today, and basically my audience loves you. Even the people that are, say, more right than you are, they say, okay, well, we can have an honest conversation with her. She's trying to talk about this stuff, all good. The one that keeps coming up with you is they still are afraid you are going to come after their guns if you were to go back into government, that they see as somehow the piece of you that is still a Democrat or something like that. I'm honestly not even totally sure of your policies on all of that. So I just leave it to you to answer their question.
Sure. I've always supported the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. What I will say has changed over the last few years is, previously, growing up in Hawaii, we have one of the most restrictive laws, one of the most states with restrictive laws in the country as it pertains to gun ownership. It takes weeks to be able to go and apply for and get a permit and actually be able to take the firearm that you purchased home with you. It's a pretty tough and rigorous process. So I didn't grow up around, shooting a lot of guns and a different culture than maybe a lot of folks have in other parts of the country. And so as I looked at what I felt were common sense policies around, making sure that we can try to prevent mass shootings in schools and so forth, that was what was informing my judgment and my decision-making as a member of Congress. The thing that has changed in a very, very impactful way for me is seeing how the danger of anyone in government overstepping their boundaries and violating our rights, and really understanding in a visceral way our founders' intent to put the Second Amendment in place was not only to defend your safety and your family, protect your family against those who seek to do you harm, but also for us as a people, as a line of defense to protect ourselves against a tyrannical government. And when you look at what has happened since 2020, in so many respects, we see more and more authoritarian-leaning decisions and intentions and policies being put forward by our own federal government. And you start to see, again, why the Second Amendment is important. That's what I started to see and better understand. There were a number of things that happened. There was the Supreme Court decision that was made with regard to the New York concealed carry permit case. I actually read through a lot of the comments and the remarks that went on throughout that case, and also the decision. And there were some things there that provided for me some fundamental insight and caused me to look at the Second Amendment in a way that, frankly, I'd never had. And very simply, which is the Second Amendment must be protected as strongly and fiercely as we protect the First Amendment. You don't have to get a permit to go, and I don't have to get a permit to go and stand on a street corner with a megaphone and start telling people what I think. Not yet, but that exactly is the point, right? That exactly is the point, is we are seeing this infringement on our right to free speech. We're seeing people in very powerful positions in our federal government pointing to the fact and questioning, well, I don't know if the First Amendment is relevant anymore. I don't know that it is necessary. And frankly, people who are even saying like it shouldn't exist in order to protect people from what they call so-called hate speech, or from people being offended, or whatever the case may be. And then again, for me, seeing these policies, these statements, this kind of direct undermining of our fundamental God-given rights that are enshrined in the Constitution further highlighted and really brought home for me in a way that that hadn't happened for me before, with the importance of the Second Amendment and why it says our rights shall not be infringed.
Is that why, when you're a guest on Tucker, or now you fairly often guest host, that alignment makes sense to you? Because even though if you would have said 5 years ago, well, wait a minute, here's a Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii, and here's Tucker Carlson, basically in the Trump camp, let's say, there's a reason that it makes sense now, because so many people have woken up to all of these infringements on our rights. Like, is that basically the genesis of what kind of brings these orbits together?
I think that's one of them. I think that the more people see, and I think a lot of people saw it through the COVID restrictions, people who maybe weren't even involved politically or don't really pay much attention to a lot of things, or never watched Tucker's show, or maybe yours, or didn't pay attention to me or whatever. I think more and more people are like, well, hold on a second. These decisions are causing my family and my community to suffer, my small business to fail, and so on. But it doesn't really make sense. These are not science-based decisions. These aren't decisions that are actually respecting our civil liberties and freedoms. And really, it just got to the heart of the fact that we had people who got a little bit of power and decided that they weren't going to let it go, and started abusing that power and making decisions that were more about themselves and their power than it was actually about helping people. And so I think there were and are a, a number of different contributing factors to that. You see people who are frustrated by corporate America abusing their power at the expense of working people. You see, I think you see impingement on religious freedom in this country, and also policies this administration is putting forward in different parts of the world. So I think there's a lot of different factors when people look at, well, hold on, what are the fundamental principles this country was founded upon? And are those who took an oath to support and defend the Constitution actually fulfilling that oath? And I think people are seeing more and more that we have Democrats and Republicans in power in this country who care more for themselves than they do for the people. And that's where you see a lot of folks from across the political spectrum, I think, coming together, putting aside the political labels and just saying, hey, this is not right. And this is not what this country and our principles are all about.
Is that sort of what stops you from just saying, hey, I'm a Republican at this point, because you just feel like it's just like an old game, so what's the point really? Because most of the things that you're saying, they do line up more with Republicans. I get Republicans usually fail on those things, but at least it's the stuff that they talk about, which really the Democrats just simply don't talk about anymore.
It's not, frankly, it's not something I'm thinking about. Being an independent, I am continuing to do what I have been doing, which is to speak the truth and to call it straight, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. I think that there are, obviously, I've been very clear in outlining the problems that I've seen with today's Democratic Party. If you look at today's Republican Party, especially what's playing out right now on C-SPAN,
Yeah.
I think there's probably a lot of Republicans who are asking, well, what does the Republican Party stand for? And like you said, one example is on the issue of civil liberties. There are different factions within the Republican Party, people who might say, yes, we stand for freedom and the Constitution and civil liberties, but these are the very same people who will stand up and defend all of the egregious provisions within the Patriot Act that undermine our civil liberties. We see the pro-war machine uniparty in Washington, leaders in both political parties. I will say there is a glimmer of hope on the Republican Party side, because unlike the Democratic Party, where there apparently are no voices now saying, well, hold on, we should exercise restraint. We shouldn't be going and trying to get ourselves into new Cold Wars and nuclear arm races and nuclear war with other countries. At least on the Republican side, there's a small but growing number of elected leaders in Congress who have the courage to stand up against the military-industrial complex and the war machine in Washington, and their own leaders in their own party, saying this is not good for the American people. This is not good for our country. So, I think it's most important for us to look to holding leaders accountable from both political parties, and actually try to bring about that systemic change that brings us back to the Constitution, not just in words, but in reality, and also brings us back to what I think is the most important premise that our leaders should use when making these decisions, whether on domestic or foreign policy, is what is in the best interest of the American people? What is in the best interest of ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people in this country?